Hey there, YouTube. I'm Yukitsu. This is the Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of something a bit weird. So, this video is just straight up Makoto Apologia because she's been getting slandered in the chat during my playthrough. This is going to have spoilers, by the way, for Persona 5 Royale, so if you haven't played it or haven't watched my videos on that, then watch my videos on that. Anyway, so basically, there have been people that have been saying that, yeah, they like her as a character, but that she gets, downgraded because of the scene near the start of her chapter, where she basically gets kidnapped by the mafia. Like I said, spoilers. Now, this is a reckless and stupid thing that she's doing at this point in time. So, you're not going to get any arguments as far as that goes from me. But I do actually think that this is a moment that really actually helps build up what her character is all about, what her internal struggles are, and what her decisions are. And it wraps up actually her character arc kind of a little bit early, because her main character arc in that chapter kind of ends at that point, whereas for everyone else, it ends way after they've joined the Phantom Thieves, or at least a decent chunk into joining into the Phantom Thieves. So let's take a look at how this sort of works and what's going on in Persona 5. So for the majority of the cast and in the majority of chapters, you start off with a few scenes that really tell you a lot about the particular problems that a specific character is going to be working through, and then it creates a resolution for that character before the end of that chapter. This is not their full character arc, but it's a miniature character arc for that individual through that chapter that's going to be resolved. So for Ryuji, for example, he's the first one that you meet. He's got this sort of bullheadedness to him where he will run directly into a conflict, but he's a little bit like a dog chasing after a car and then getting run over by it because he doesn't know what to do once he's run in front of the car other than get run over. And obviously, that's not really a good way of acting or engaging with the problems that he's facing. And while the overall character arc throughout the entire story is going to be different, as far as Chapter 1 is concerned, what they're going to do is give him the power to do something once he's caught the car. And that's simply in joining the Phantom Thieves and in getting his persona. Once he's gotten the strength and the ability to fight back, he starts fighting back and he's able to sort of throw himself into these problems and be able to do something useful. He's still just as impulsive as he's always been, but now he's capable of acting on those impulses in a way that is more constructive than it was prior. For Anne, in that same chapter, we start seeing a few glimpses of what her problem is through Shiho. And during the sort of little dialogue between those two characters, you start noticing all of these different moments where Anne clearly wants to say something to Shiho, but then holds back. There are things that she wants to say to whoever, and she decides not to. It's something that she's uncomfortable talking about. It's something that she's not responsible for. It's not technically something that she should have to deal with. It's not something that she's strong enough to deal with. And she needs, throughout that character arc, to learn how to speak out and say what she needs to say, even if it's not her responsibility, even if it's not in her place to be talking about whatever it is she's talking about. This is why at the end of the Kamoshida sort of arc there, she's the one that talks him down during the confrontation in the castle at the very end there. She's the one who calls him out during the assembly and tells him what he needs to confess to. And that's because that was what she was sort of building towards, being able to say what needed to be said when she could say it. And that's not her full arc either. Her full arc is also accepting that, she doesn't need to be responsible for all of those sort of things. She actually gets a little bit abandoned by the plot, I think a little bit earlier than some of the others, but she still has more character arc and more development that she needs to go through other than that. So if you're finding that any of these character arcs are unfulfilling, that's because they're not their complete arcs, but they are a self-contained miniature arc within the chapter. The same then goes for Yusuke. We only get glimpses of his development when we're actually with him, and we start off by seeing the sort of interactions where the Phantom Thieves and Anne in particular are with him at the art gallery or at the studio, and we get more of them when he's interacting with Shadow Madarame. But his is breaking apart from that denial that he has about the crimes that Madarame has committed. And once he's able to get rid of that denial, once he's able to sort of accept Madarame for what he actually is, he's able to sort of fight back against him in the way that he needs to. And that's a fairly simplistic arc, but that is his arc there. Makoto's is actually fairly complicated, and she actually has her arc revealed to us in the middle of Yusuke's chapter, the one where we're starting to deal with Madarame. And it appears at first that it's going to be about expectations and pressure, and that is to a certain degree a part of her character arc, but it's not really the main crux of it, and it's not the main story. Now, I want to mention, in class, prior to Makoto's chapter, just prior to Makoto's chapter, we have a conversation in school during one of the questions about Hegelian dialects. And the Hegelian dialect is the idea of a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis of ideas. And I don't think that that was put there by accident. I think that this was put in front of Makoto's chapter because her chapter is going to be a Hegelian dialect, and I view her chapter as being one in the way that it's framed and the way that it's presented. And if you're viewing her chapter as a Hegelian dialect between two different ideas, then the way that she acts during the interaction with Kaneshiro makes a lot more sense. So let's take a look at her scenes. She's talking to the principal, she's talking to students, she's clearly stressed out by her role. They make it seem like it's because of the expectations, the pressure to perform, the pressure to do things. But I think that there's reason to believe that they actually portray her as being too competent to actually be overly stressed by the expectation or by the pressure, because she actually catches on to the fact that you're the Phantom Thieves very quickly. She also gets evidence that you're the Phantom Thieves fairly quickly. And she's able to sort of figure out a lot about what she needs to with surprisingly scant evidence to work from. That's not the sort of thing that someone who's worried about their competency worries about. So what's really going on here? Well, there's a couple things. I do think that the pressure and the ability to perform is something that is bothering her, but I don't think that that's actually the main issue at heart for her, because she does decide at the end of this arc to take on a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, to be under a lot of pressure in her work with the Phantom Thieves. She doesn't decide that she's going to negate that. That's not really the crux of her issue. We get a better glimpse of what the issue actually is in her conversations with Sae, and it is in that Sae keeps pushing her to follow her lead, to be someone who's on that Sigma grind set, where all she cares about is material gains, the ability to earn money, to get ahead in the world, to be an important, a powerful person, regardless of who you have to step on, no matter what you have to destroy, no matter what you have to do, no matter how much you have to ignore your own principles. And the other end of that dialect that gets revealed in their conversations is their father. And he is a man who died for his ideals. That's sort of how that's portrayed. I don't know exactly what happens with him. But that's essentially the crux of the idea there. That's the thesis and antithesis in conflict with one another. Now, right before she runs off and gets kidnapped by the mafia, there's two flashbacks, and I think that people are going to focus on one and not really understand the other one, because this reveals, I think, where people can get mixed up here. She flashes back to the idea that she is useless when Sae sort of calls her that, and this is her failing to be the person who is on that Sigma grind set, the person who is just working. She's thinking about other things, and she shouldn't be doing that. All she needs to do is focus on getting ahead no matter what. She shouldn't be thinking about ethics, morals. She shouldn't be thinking about other people. She should just be thinking about getting herself ahead. And that's why her sister is calling her useless. She's not doing that. And then she also remembers, though, Akechi saying that she's just the pushover good girl who does what she's told, which is him calling her out for following along with Sae's influence, that person who conforms to society's expectations to just do what you're supposed to do. And that's the other side of things. Akechi is presenting the other side of the coin, to follow her own internal code rather than following the external code that her sister and the world and society at large is pushing her towards. So it's easy to expect that she's thinking about her uselessness in terms of she's too stressed, she's too pressured, she can't actually do anything. The reason she can't do anything is she's caught between these two ideas, and she doesn't know whether she should do the one thing or the other. And the confrontation she has with the Phantom Thieves over that sort of element to her life is that breaking point where she decides to make a decision. She's not going to sit back. She's not going to continue doing the things that she's supposed to be doing. She's going to sacrifice herself for her ideals at that moment. And she does so. And I think that that's sort of why the scene works to further her character and to further that character arc in that narrative. Because instead of actually sacrificing herself, we reach the synthesis here in that there are more pragmatic ways of going about your ideals that you can follow if you need to. And it involves, in this particular case, joining the Phantom Thieves and using their magical bullshit to be able to change people's minds. Obviously not something that's super applicable in other people's situations that are doing similar sort of things, but it works for her. So that, at the end of the day, is, I think, why this is actually a pretty sensible decision for her to make during the situation. She's past her breaking point. She is extremely stressed. She is extremely, pushed beyond her limits here. But it's also her conviction and deciding that she is going to do something as reckless as it is based on her ideals, not on what society expects of her, not on what she's expected to be able to do. So I think that that makes her a much more interesting character. I think that that makes that a much better scene than a lot of people give it credit for. And I think that that makes her a more well-fleshed-out character in terms of her narrative arc. And as you can see, this does mean that her character's miniature little narrative arc does actually end at that point. It by the time that she is actually with the Phantom Thieves, even before she has her transformation, she's completed her narrative arc. She has decided what she is going to move forward doing. She's not going to be on that path that her sister laid out for her. And she's going to follow instead her own code and her own ethics and her own ideals instead. So I think that's just a neat way of portraying that. I think that that scene works well. I think that fleshes her out as a better character than I think people are giving credit for. But at the end of the day, maybe that's not how you interpret what was happening there. I think that there is definitely room for interpretation, but that's definitely what I see in that particular narrative arc. So if I didn't change your mind, that's fine. Again, I don't really care. She's not even actually my favorite of the characters that beats Kemi, but, still felt like making this because it was fun to do. In any event, hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.